Hi, my name is Prashant, and today I'm discussing about the interference that we get in the high-speed data transmission in a character LCD while interfacing directly with the MCU. In the last video, we showed you to how to interface MCU with the character LCD. With that interfacing, we get some issues on that. At that transmission, it was happening successfully. But before that, how we reached there to that solutions, I want to share that with you. So the primary purpose of our discussion initially was to build on that to interface the character LCD directly with the MCU. So while the MCU is sending direct signals to the character LCD, the character LCD is getting a different data, different set of bits than what we are sending through the MCU. Which means one we are sending 1 and 0 to the MCU to the character LCD, and we are getting a different sequence of 1s and 0s as the character LCD. When we are sending at a very low speed of a single bit sending in multiple second interval, which happens when we are sending the bits through human click, which can take multiple seconds to send a single bit when we are using buttons to send the commands to the character LCD in the form of 1 and 0s. The MCU and the character LCD itself understands that signal and get enough time to understand what the signal range is there, to what the signal is there, and correctly understand the signal. Things do happen when we start transmitting data at a very high speed directly from the MCU to the character LCD. So there is an IC at the character LCD itself that gets this data and do all the stuff for us. When we are sending the data from the MCU to the character LCD, what happens at a very high speed, the electromagnetic interference come into place. And electromagnetic interference is all around us. Whenever we switch on a load, whenever you plug in a device, even a minor spark introduces a large amount of electromagnetic interference. And at that high speed data transmission, it is getting affected. So those bits of 1 and 0s that are there during the transmission for nanosecond interval means 100,000 fraction of a second, 100,000, more than that. Fraction of a second, the bits got changed because that interference, electromagnetic interference is happening, is sufficient enough to change that bits from 1 to 0 and 0 to 1. And it is happening randomly. So what we did, we added some pull down resistors eventually to keep those things have a sufficient value to the ground when we are not sending any data to those pins, which solves some of our problems. Now we are able to send a high-speed data transmission directly from the MCU to the LCD. And it got solved. Now when we run this thing for an extended period of time, we see the interference was still happening, although lots of interference problems have been solved. But at some times, interference is still happening. Because we have controlled the low of the things, now we have to control the high of the things. So how we control that upper bit of the thing? We are controlling the 0 bits, we have controlled through the grounding of the pins by adding a pull down resistor. How we control that upper bit of the bit? The one that is transmission at the very high speed. So what we add some capacitors to maintain that high level. So the thing is that maintaining at high level means it will change the low to high that is coming from the MCU? No. It will correct the interference that is introduced to the electromagnetic interference that is happening around it. So it will correct that interference and make the signal much stronger that is coming from the MCU to be detected correctly by the corrector LCD and does not affected by the electromagnetic interference that is happening through the switching of the load. So what was happening earlier? Even we switch on a fan, we switch on a bulb, even a switch on a light, simple light, the table lamp. That small amount of interference is affecting the data transmission. But after adding these pull down resistors and these capacitors to controlling the interference, now we are successfully transmitting data at a very high speed. At the 100,000 more of a fraction of a second, and the data is transmitting throughout day, throughout night, and whole day it is very successful for multiple days now. So we think we have come to a conclusion that we actually have solved the interference problems in a high speed signal that is transmitted from the MCU to the corrector LCD. And it started some years earlier and solved now in recent days. Thanks for your time.